there. I'm Amy.Connell. Welcome to Graced Health, the podcast for women who want simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves and enjoy a little chocolate in the process. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach who wants you to know your eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do. Now, before we begin, I have to say I'm feeling a little awkward right now. I decided to do something a little different and record myself in time lapse of almost beginning to end of the process of creating this podcast because, there's just a lot to it. And sometimes I just thought it would be interesting to chronicle. So I've already written all of the notes that I did to prepare to all of this. And I'm trying really hard not to look into the camera that's on me over my shoulder. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today, my awkwardness. Well, I'm always up for talking about my awkwardness, but no, today I want to talk about the fine line between motivation and mania. I'm not really sure where I came up with this concept. I think I was kind of preparing for another podcast that I was going to be interviewed on. The person had given me some questions ahead of time. And as I was thinking through how I wanted to answer them, this concept came up just to me in my own head. And actually, we ended up not talking about it, which is why I wanted to come on and talk to you about it today. Motivation is wonderful. And I think that can really power us through and that can really give us incentive. And we're going to talk all about motivation here in just a second. But there really is a fine line, which we're going to talk about today, about how that can bleed from motivation to what I am calling mania. So before we really get into this, I want to break both of these words down, and then we are going to tackle them separately. So I went to Merriam-Webster and looked up the definition. I'm like, okay, what is motivation? So motivation, according to Merriam-Webster, is something such as a need or desire that causes a person to act. And then mania, and we'll get into this here in a minute, but mania is excitement manifested by mental and physical hyperactivity, disorganization of behavior, and elevation of mood, excessive or unreasonable enthusiasm. So just kind of pocket the mania part. We're going to get back to it. But for now, I want to talk about motivation. Let's start with the basic question. What is your motivation? I think we all have a different answer to that. I can tell you that the longer I spend time training women and the longer I kind of have those intake first meeting goals and just discussion, oftentimes I hear a lot of maybe it's not exactly the same thing, but the same version is, I just want to take care of myself. I'm tired of taking care of my people ahead of me, my family ahead of me, my job ahead of me, my business ahead of me, my dogs ahead of me. I mean, look, I do the same thing. I get it, but I just really need to take some time and take care of myself. So I want to give you an opportunity really quickly. I'm going to do one of those really awkward pauses where I ask you, what is your motivation for health? Okay, I know those are weird, but you know what? This is the thing. If I don't give you that chance to just kind of think about it for a second, if you're like me, you will just skim over it and you'll just kind of keep ingesting and not really consider it. So I think it's worth doing. Okay, so where does your motivation come from? Sometimes it comes from ourselves, and then sometimes we are motivated by others. Sometimes it's our friends. It might be coaches we have or gyms that we go to that are creating challenges or other things to keep us motivated to keep coming back. It might be your watch. If you did not listen to Should Your Goals Hold You Back, I share way too much information about my relationship with my watch, and you can go back and listen to that. Now, some of this may be review for many of you, but I want to go ahead and get into this. And that is the two different types of motivation there are extrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. I did some research and found some really great articles, particularly from Psychology Today, that I will reference in the show notes. So that's just where a lot of my information is coming from today. But extrinsic motivation is basically motivation from outside yourself. So some of that, like weight loss, is included in that. I want to have a perky butt, that's included in that. Maybe you are motivated to win an event. Maybe you're wanting to run. Maybe you're participating in a CrossFit event. Maybe, whatever it is, maybe you're wanting to win at a race or an event. And then if we're going to get even more detailed, there are two different subtypes of extrinsic motivation. There's guilt avoidance and people pleasing. And as I get into this, I'm like, oh man, I think they wrote this for me because I am a people pleaser. And I would like to say I'm recovering. It's something I'm working on. And of course, there is the guilt too that goes along with, I feel guilty if I didn't work out. I feel guilty if I had this. And that might be some motivation as well. Now, intrinsic motivation is more internal. It's a little bit more meaningful. So maybe weight loss is an external motivation, but your intrinsic is, okay, I want to lose the weight because I want to be able to run around with my kids and not get winded, or I want to be able to get out of bed and feel good in the morning rather than hunched over for the first 30 minutes. So it's that idea that both the process and the journey will produce, and I'm going to give this quote from Psychology Today, but energizing emotions such as interest, enjoyment, and challenge. So it's what are those core values that are driving your actions and decisions. So there's this thing called self-determination theory. By the way, again, remember, I'm not a mental health professional, but this is stuff that I did in some research in preparation for this episode. So how do you cultivate this intrinsic motivation? So according to this self-determination theory, it's fueled by feelings of competence, relatedness, and autonomy. And I really want to hone in on the autonomy. I want you to remember that word because we're going to come back to it. But basically, in order to muster up enough intrinsic motivation to reach your goals for a long period of time or permanently, then you've got to feel confident in your ability to succeed. You need to believe that you have independently chosen those rules without too much outside influence, and have a sense of belonging with people who support you in your goal. Now, the middle part of that to me really, it just kind of gives me, I don't know if gives me pause is the right word, but independently chosen the rules without too much outside influence. That goes back to the autonomy. And that goes back to the conversation that we have a lot here on Graced Health, which is do what you can do, and you take care of your body so you can do what you're called to do, what God is asking you to do today, what He's asking you to do this afternoon, short-term, long-term, creatively. If you missed the episode on how do I know my calling, go back and listen to that. I'll put the link in the show notes, but that's where we talk about a lot about what are you called to do, and that is your influence and that is your driving factor because it's kind of intertwined. You know, what God is asking us to do, that's for me, at least, I can't speak for you, but for me, that is what drives me. And that is what keeps me going. It's not someone else saying, Amy, you need to be doing this, or Amy, you need to start a podcast, or Amy, you should start a YouTube channel, which, you know, for example, someone asked me to start a YouTube channel several years ago. And I was like, maybe I should do that. And she gave me a lot of great, compelling reasons why. And it was probably a good idea. And maybe that would have been good. But you know what? I just couldn't get into it. I didn't like the idea of being on camera. And I don't have very good skills like with iMovie and Final Cut Pro. And I could have used my son to do the editing, but I didn't want to do that. And so like that was an extrinsic motivating thing for YouTube. And let's just say that for the most part, my YouTube channel is dormant. I'm just not on that anyway. So anyway, going back to, so I get on, you know me, I get on my tangents. So we do need to have that sense of belonging with people who support us. However, the support it's not always effective because you've got to have that autonomy. You've got to have that internal driver of what you're doing and why you're doing it. For me, a lot of my why, particularly in this Grace Health space, is I really feel like that's where God wants me. But I also have whys in my other space. Like I have high blood pressure. My why for some of the foods that I eat and some of the decisions I make is because I want to manage that high blood pressure. Additionally, my why for taking not one, but 2 high blood pressure pills every single morning is because my husband and my kids deserve to have their mom around as long as possible. Okay, Amy, you're getting off on a tangent again. But anyway, identify the why. Identify the why and remember that you want to be driving that, not necessarily someone else telling you what you want to do. So there's these different types of support. They provide accountability. They provide sponsorship. And what can happen is they can get so strong that they can do more harm than good because then you're relying on them rather than yourself, rather than that intrinsic motivation, that autonomy. And then that can turn into, and this is really critical for people like me who are people pleasers and want to have that guilt avoidance, is then we're starting to do it for the approval of an outsider and not for ourselves. You can find supportive communities. And if you listen to the episode with JL Alexander with Black Girls Run, that sounds like a wonderful, supportive community that's providing just the right amount of accountability, but not with that over dependence on it. So those supportive communities can create a sense of belonging. It can provide cheerleading for your own internal goals. So they're just supporting what you have already identified as your own goals. And then when we fail, well, I don't know, maybe you don't fail, but I do. When I fail or I drop the ball, then that community will help pick me up and keep going even when those mistakes are made. So again, it's really important to determine your why. And I know this is not a new concept to you, but you keep going back to that. When I did the Faster Way to Fat Loss with Candace Harris, I can put that episode in the show notes as well. That was one thing that she kept going back to. She really challenged us at the very beginning, like, what is your why? Why are you doing this? And then whenever we do have those moments of either not wanting to do what is best for our goals, or when we mess up, we go back to that why. So in identifying that intrinsic motivation really does help you drive to your goals. But remember that those 3 things that are part of it: competence, relatedness, and then again, the autonomy. Once you lose that autonomy, in my opinion, you may be stepping into mania. Let's review that definition of mania from Merriam-Webster. So it's excitement manifested by mental, and physical hyperactivity, disorganization of behavior, and elevation of mood, excessive or unreasonable enthusiasm. And I wish you could see my hands right now because my entire upper body is just all tensed up. My shoulders are tense. My hands are clawing at myself. I didn't even realize that I was doing that until just now. And it's just that feeling, that manic feeling. So I want to give you a few examples of times that I have experienced mania. And maybe you've had these, maybe you haven't. But I have, for example, I will get on track. And there are seasons in my year where I'm really, really focused and diligent from my food and my fitness. And then there are seasons where I'm a little less focused. We'll just say, I bet you can guess when those are. First quarter of the year, super, super focused. Last quarter of the year, maybe not as focused. But anyway, I will fall into sacrificing relationships and sacrificing friendships in the name of not wanting to get off track. So I don't spend a lot of time with my friends the first quarter of the year because let's just be honest, when I get together with my friends and we're not walking, then we're either eating or we're drinking wine. And that's not necessarily conducive to my goals. So that can be a little mania or a manic. And you've got to figure out what is that balance for you. Just because that's kind of how I am. And I know, and then what I try and do personally is I try and have those relationships on the sidewalks. So it's like, okay, we're not going out to dinner for the next few months, but let's go for a walk every now and then. And I really prioritize that. So another example of mania, feeling like you've let someone down if you don't show up. So yes, accountability is good, but what's driving you? What is that motivation? What is your why? For people pleasers like me, it can be really painful to think that we have disappointed someone. And again, I know I'm not supposed to be a people pleaser. I'm supposed to be a Jesus pleaser. And I'm working on that, you guys. But this is just something that is deep in my core. And I think it's going to consistently be a challenge for the rest of my life. But what I can find is I get resentful if I don't have the grace to make individual adjustments. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but the thing that I have to remember is my friends are wonderful people. And I mean, even just this morning, I have been training my friends early in the morning. And I said, you know what? I need to take the day off because I needed to see a friend face to face because this friend was virtual. And you know what? They were super supportive of that because they knew that, and they understood that I needed like face to face. I need to see someone. So I hope that makes sense, but keep the accountability, but don't let it override your individual need for adjustments. Now, another way I have expressed mania before is continually pushing through and really, quite honestly, ignoring the pain that I have to meet a goal. The most prominent memory I have of this is when I was running or when I was training for a half marathon. And I also remember at some point, I was probably 2 or 3 weeks away from race day. And for me, I have to train pretty diligently for about 3 or 4 months for a half marathon because I don't run that much. Like I don't run long distance very much really anymore for that matter. But I remember doing something and I stubbed my toe. And my very first thought was, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to run. And maybe that was a little bit of mania, but I was also really ignoring a lot of the pain signals that my body was giving in to meet this goal. Now I get it. Like this can get a little muddy, but then what I was done with the half marathon is I took a lot of time off and like I didn't walk. I soaked my feet in ice baths every day to try and reduce the inflammation. So again, you know, I understand pushing through to meet a goal, but we've got to pay attention to our body in the meantime. Or maybe from a shorter perspective, if your workout is leaving you so spent or it's impacting your life in other ways, then maybe it's worth considering if you have crossed over into mania. And I would say, if this is happening over and over and over again, I mean, look, we all have times that we might have a more intense workout than we were planning on. And, you know, that's just for me, that makes me want to go to bed at 8:40 and it makes me really cranky with my people. So I learned my lesson. And the next time I did that class, I took a nap because I just closed my eyes for 20 minutes. Again, if you haven't listened to the rest, what can you do on a rest day from last month for the solo episode, go listen to that. And then the other thing I would like to suggest, and I might get some pushback on this, and that's okay, but choosing to do something to keep the check marks going or to close those circles on our watch, like I talked about in January, despite physically or mentally needing to do something different, that can very easily take us into that mania of like, I got to do this. And then again, my fingers are clawing in my chest right now. This is just, I guess, my body language for mania. I mean, and this is one thing that this is called is streaks, right? Like the first time I heard of streaks, it was my kid on Snapchat, and he has finally like realized that maybe streaks just aren't that big a deal. So, which is really great. But I get the power of streaks. There are workout streaks. There are running or walking streaks. These are all good. I have streaks on my Bible app, which I mean, I get it. I broke my Bible app streak in December of 2020 that I had been keeping since January 1st. So it was like 342 days. I was so close to that 365 days, and I don't remember what happened, but I just didn't get on, and I broke my streak. And it just, yeah, I know, like it did. It hurt a little. It was a little painful, but I had created the habit in getting on the Bible app. So I still had the habit. I still picked it back up. You can keep your habit even if your circle isn't closed. You can keep your habit even if you don't check off the day or you don't get your 10,000 steps a day or something like that. Remember what the intent is. Remember what the why is. The why is to create those habits, not to do the physical check mark. And I know, like, I'm a big fan of the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. He loves the check marks. And that's great, but I think we have to be realistic as well, because we don't want to be a failure if we don't check it off. And then again, I know I just talked about rest, and I'm going to say it again because it's so important to me right now, but not allowing yourself rest in the name of meeting a goal, that may be mania. I feel like I'm a little bit like, I feel like the Jeff Foxworthy, like I'm from Oklahoma. So I love if you, you might be a redneck. This is what's coming on in my head right now is you might have mania. Okay. Maybe I need a little more coffee or something, you guys. Okay. All right. So anyway, we talked about some of my own personal examples of mania. Now, this is something I'm going to propose, and I don't know how mental health professionals would feel about this. I hope that this is in line, because I never, ever, ever want to give you poor advice. But I think the fine line between motivation and mania is when we shift from our intrinsic motivation to extrinsic, to relying on the circles, the checks, the friends, the coaches, the gyms to meet our goals. And it's when we lose that autonomy of our goals, that's the line. That's the fine line between motivation and mania. Again, I really want you to feel empowered to let your body and your brain overrule the ambition, overrule the goal. Once you lose that ability to discern what's best for you, you've lost that autonomy, and maybe you've stepped into the mania. And now listen, I will say, sometimes we do have to boss ourselves around, our body and our brain. I'm not suggesting that every single morning when my alarm clock goes off at 5:25, I hit snooze or stop and I go back to sleep and then just roll over in the name of listening to my body. I want more sleep. No, that's not what I'm saying. Every now and then, fine. But yeah, it's going to suck. Sorry, mom. I know you hate that word, but it does. It sucks sometimes to keep pushing through and do that. But as long as we're keeping into that, okay, this is what I'm doing for myself with my intrinsic motivation. And then the other thing I just kind of want to layer on and put out there is as this is coming out, this is the last year we have been in COVID, and I have learned a lot from Brene Brown and her Unlocking Us podcast about dealing with COVID. And she calls them FFTs. I'll let you figure out the first F, and then it's first time. Would do that. And then later on, she did this whole thing on day 2 and how it's exhausting. And so I think we have to give ourselves an extra dose of grace in this last year, because we're all figuring it out. And I don't know about you, but I have decision fatigue about all the things. My friend Barbara said the 3 best words that I have used over and over and over recently, which is worn out resilience. I consider myself a pretty resilient person, but I'm worn out from it and I'm tired of it. And resilience is hard in normal times. It is really hard right now. I am currently, as I'm recording this, worn out. If that is you, you are not alone. And to that, I would encourage you to remember to respect the season you're in. And we are in COVID season, and there are a lot of really difficult things that have gone through it with job loss and life loss and changes in schedules and kids. And like, I don't need to say all the things, right? You know that. So I think that is something to remember right now. However, if you're listening to this and maybe you have discovered this podcast a year from now and it's March of 22, and hopefully, God, please, hopefully we're all out of COVID by then, there may be other challenges. And actually, I'm going to correct that. There will still be other challenges. Again, it might be job related. It might be marriage related. I have heard that there's a lot of statistics that COVID is impacting marriages all over the place. Children related. Our own mental health is suffering. Our children's mental health is suffering. So there will continue to be challenges no matter what. You're going to have these. And in order for us to have overall health of mind, spirit, and body, we've got to take all of this into consideration. So what is your motivation for keeping moving? What is your motivation for your health? Make sure that it is that your intrinsic is guiding you. And your why, by the way, your why can change. So remember that as you make decisions on your day-to-day basis about your health. And it's going to look different for different people. For example, hitting the pavement and getting outside or hitting the trails may be really therapeutic for you. And it is for me. Like when I am feeling my emotional health start to tumble down, I know that I've got to get outside in the fresh air, preferably in the sun if it's possible. But I know that this is what I need to do. Maybe that's not what's best for you, and that's okay. But you've got to figure out what keeps you motivated, what keeps your why going. Keep your autonomy. Keep the autonomy. But be wary of crossing over into mania in the name of meeting your goals. I really hope this makes sense to you. It made a whole lot of sense in my head when I started coming up with it. So I do hope this made sense. Now, before we get to the one simple thing, I have a couple housekeeping notes. I have been putting all of the Ask the Trainer episodes in season 5. So I have probably 50 Ask the Trainer episodes in season 5. But what I'm realizing is those are getting lost. So starting with next season, which starts next week, those will be going in just with the season in which they are released. So everything will be chronologic. Yeah. And then the way I'm going to be working is every season is 3 months. So each month I have something that's fitness related, something that's Jesus related, something overall health, and then one of these solo episodes. And if I have an extra one or an extra week in the month, then we'll throw something fun in or just throw something additional. So, and then the Ask the Trainers come out, of course, on Thursday, and you can just listen to those whenever that works for you. But those are all going to be embedded in each season. Secondly, okay, this feels really hard to ask. Like, it just, I don't like it. But if you find value in this show, would you buy me a cup of coffee? Now, don't worry. I'm not going to take an hour out of your day because neither one of us have any time for that. But what I mean is a $5 virtual cup of coffee that supports the show. There are a lot of back-end costs associated with producing this podcast and the content on my website and the socials. I mean, that's just how it is. Having a podcast is not income generating. There's no revenue associated with that without sponsorships and advertisements. And that's just not something I'm really wanting to get into at this point. It's all free to you, but it's not free to me. So any kind of one-time or monthly support that you can give is greatly appreciated. And I'm really not kidding when I say $5. Like that would be really grateful. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/Amy.connell, and it's CONNELL. I'll also put the link in the show notes, and just do whatever is worth it to, or whatever value you think you get, but $5 would be really grateful. And then thirdly, if that's not in your budget, simply sharing any episode to one friend or even better, your Facebook friends is very helpful in getting the word out. Take any of the shows that you enjoy, share it along, take a screenshot, just put it, people can find it. They're smart enough. They can get it. Okay, enough housekeeping. What's the one simple thing I want you to remember? This is not going to be a surprise, but we're just going to go over it anyway. Keep checking in with your why. Let it drive you, and then give yourself some grace along the way. Okay, that is all for today. Go out there and have a great day.